3 coffins wrapped in lead, which offered the promise of real preservation.
This is a very unusual find, the first that certainly has been discovered anywhere in North America and probably South America from this time period.
The hottest speculation is about who's buried inside those rare lead coffins. The hot guess? Members of Maryland's founding family, the Calverts.
We know by virtue of the fact that they're buried in lead coffins that they were fairly wealthy individuals. There's other clues, though. Where they're located is in one arm of the cross, and if you're on the altar, it is the right-hand side of the altar. And of course, in Christian belief, the right-hand side of God is very, very important.
So have you got more of it exposed?
Tim Reardon's triple discovery came in 1990, followed by 2 years of very impatient patience.
It would have been real easy to try and lift them out of the pit at that point, to open them up and see what was there. But then we would have committed a great crime against the public knowledge. So we covered them up until we could organize it to the point where we would be able to get as much data out of it as possible.
I would like to go around and introduce the members of the committee.
Before unwrapping his prize, Henry Miller wanted to put together a team of scientists as unprecedented as the discovery they would examine.
We have assembled individuals that you wouldn't normally think of as even being involved in an archaeological project, because all of them have expertise that can bear on not only tapping the information that lies buried here, but aiding us in potentially identifying who these individuals truly are.
Among the experts on hand, one of NASA's top atmospheric scientists, the Army's former chief forensic pathologist, and another pathologist who was among those who helped determine that Joseph Mengele was dead. We started watching Miller's team, the technical advisory panel, when they convened in March of 1991, and then again in May at Annapolis, where they devised a specific plan of attack.
If that lead is thin enough, it's going to collapse.
2 years after the 3 coffins were uncovered, they were ready to be explored.
The real excitement for me is that they are still potentially sealed. So we may well have 3 time capsules dating back over 300 years. On the one hand, we may find simply very well-preserved bones and the wood of the internal wooden coffins there. On the other hand, if we're very lucky, we could find completely preserved remains.
Weeks ago, exploration began. The coffins were re-exposed.
Very exciting. Good to see them again. Look at that. Oh, wow.
When we return, we'll show you how 2 years of preparations and technological developments were necessary before the 3 lead coffins could be unearthed.
When we come back, how science, technology, and a bit of luck come together for an astonishing look at the past. And later in this broadcast, we'll talk with the man who headed the recovery effort at St. Miss. Hospital tent is being prepped at Fort Story in Virginia to be used for forensic exams. Cradles to lift the coffins out of the ground are being built at 2 local Navy bases. A sophisticated imaging device is being readied in Pennsylvania for the trip to St. Mary City. At the site, the first order of business is to see inside the coffin, to get an idea of what's in them and to ascertain their physical condition. Nuclear scientist Mark Moore has devised a way to use a gamma-ray source to penetrate the lead and generate what looks like a hospital X-ray picture.
The source comes up this tube and pops into this hole. And then it shoots its radiation out in this cone, just like it's coming out of this. I want to center this right smack in the middle of the coffin.
Once the film is placed opposite the source, the tent is evacuated.
Everybody clear out.
Everybody.
During each exposure, technicians carefully monitor the area for dangerous levels of radiation.
I can see 2 potential eye sockets at the top.
Nose, teeth. I agree with you, but it's just really...
Well, I see 2 eye sockets up here.
The images are reviewed later that day, and Mark's system has worked brilliantly.
Okay, get in there and look. Both of them suggest that we've got a situation of very good preservation.
Yes, very good preservation. I was thinking that this is hair, that this is a forehead,
and
that's an eye right there.
That's what I see.
And that there's a very slight line going up here.
We're here today because the opportunity of obtaining something we've been looking for a long time, a sample of air predating the Industrial Revolution.
Dr. Joel Levine is an atmospheric scientist from NASA.
In order to assess the impact of human activities, we have to know what the atmosphere looked like prior to global industrialization, and at this point we don't know.
In one of the most unique experiments, air will be extracted from each coffin. The hope is that the coffins remain sealed, allowing scientists to retrieve 300-year-old air. Such perfectly unpolluted air would provide a baseline against which all later air could be compared. It would be a Rosetta Stone of information about man's impact on Earth's environment. The gamma images are consulted again and again to make sure that nothing's disturbed upon entering the coffin. A hollow needle is slowly twisted into each coffin to retrieve the air. At the same time, a second hole is drilled for another miracle of modern science. This fiber optic camera Frank Bescher contributed. The camera is carefully inserted.
Let's go. Yeah. The skull is very dark, which suggests that we have soft tissue preservation, which is really a good sign.
The air samples from the smaller coffins are as big a bust as the fiber optic camera has been a big hit. The largest coffin is the last chance for 300-year-old air. Early the next morning, the crew heads for the site.
We're very confident that we have a really good chance to get an air sample that's not contaminated. We're all very excited to get started. You can feel the nervousness.
With the larger coffin, the interpretation of the gammograms is much harder. So it's kind of nerve-wracking. So to get our best shot would be from right here. Okay, listen up. We're getting ready to go. Okay, everybody get into place. Go a little bit more, Andy, just a tad more. We got a clear line. Damn.
Okay, we now have a gas sample.
Come along.
The coffin is sealed, and as many canisters as possible are filled before they're rushed off to the lab for analysis. To see if the samples are pure, they'll be tested for CFCs, man-made substances that wouldn't exist in colonial air. With NASA happy, the fiberscope is prepared for insertion into the big coffin.
And it looks like an intact wood coffin inside.
That's got to mean good preservation.
Oh, yeah.
Again, the fiber optic camera is a success. Although they can't see any human features, the scientists do see the pristine condition of the wooden casket inside that wrapping of lead. This raises their hopes that they'll find preserved human remains.
Hold on, that is a great shot. Look how polished that the surface appears to be.
This is real good results. It appears we found is an intact wood coffin that is in great shape.
Any human remains inside the coffin would decay rapidly if they were exposed to air. To prevent that possibility, an inert gas, argon, is pumped into the coffin. Their temperature and humidity are constantly monitored. Before the coffins can be opened, other tests must be done. A geologist examines a soil profile of the burial pit, trying to determine the order of burial. Another specialist takes soil samples to look for microscopic traces of 17th century pollen. That, too, could help determine the order of burial or reveal what the landscape was like, or even how the buildings were used. One last series of tests before the coffins are opened, the non-destructive evaluation. This can reveal if there are any flaws or weak spots in the coffins before they're moved. This is the same technique used to check jet aircraft for damage.
If this had been discovered and opened 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, the amount of information obtained would have been minuscule compared to what we can do today.
When our story continues, the climax of a 2-year project, the opening of the 3 lead caskets. Technicians inside the tent house in the St. Mary's Chapel crypt.
Get their little scalpel blades warmed up.
All the preparations were complete, all the hypotheses spelled out. Now it was time to open the coffins and know what they had to reveal.
Come on up, straight up.
Hand it right down.
This little child was a surprise because as we were looking through the borescope, it made everything look so large.
Also a surprise, because it had been known the little coffin was badly damaged, was how well preserved and orderly the little skeleton was. And as it turned out after some closer examination, how eloquently full of information.
One of the fascinating aspects from the skeleton is there are a number of characteristics that are not normal. The ribs are funny here. You see this kind of blossoming, this swelling?
Was this rickets-like condition particular to this child, or was it a sign of famine in the year of its birth? Or was it a clue to the health of the child's mother, who might have been buried alongside? On Wednesday, the second casket was unsealed.
This is really incredible, this preservation.
Not only was there another well-preserved skeleton, in this coffin, soft tissue remained, and fabric from a shroud, and...
So there's a bow in there? I couldn't see it right here from this angle, but cloth like that? Wow.
For archaeologist Curtis Moyer, the ribbon bow wrapped around the arm and wrist of the woman found in coffin number 2 was the treasure of the trove, not only for scientific reasons.
I think everyone was very affected by the ribbon when we opened up the coffin yesterday.
Her skeleton revealed some painful autobiography, a badly set, permanently deformed, broken leg.
And so she probably would be walking with a limp sort of this way as she was going along.
Let's just have 1 minute of silence, in sort of memory and respect, okay?
So went the preamble of the Lead Coffins Project's climactic day.
Okay, let's do it.
A moment of meditation followed by hours of intense labor.
Go ahead.
Then the largest coffin was slowly, inch by inch, winched away from the wall of dirt that had held its size. Mark Moore calls this the most delicate moment in the whole operation, the actual hoisting of the big coffin out of the crypt. How sure, I asked him, are you can do this safely? 99%, he said. Anything less than that, and this coffin will sit where it sits and we'll open it right here. The only sound in the usually boisterous tent was the rattling of the chain passing through the winch. Then the coffin, the lead lid weighs a good 250 pounds alone, was eased onto a caisson and rolled into the medical tent. It took another special brace and 8 men lifting to bring the lid off. As the team rushed to look inside the big coffin, their faces told a subtle story. This time, the humble minutiae of the coffin, the tracks of termites across a well-preserved wooden lid, the pollen grains inside the dirt and fabric in the coffin, outweighed the value of the corpse, whose skull had caved in and whose most interesting feature was a full head of hair.
We are on the verge of some very important insights. We're collecting the data now. We'll be analyzing them in the next few months. But information, hopefully, about diet, information about disease, about general health conditions, about even hairstyle and things like that. There's a lot of facts that we have to weave together to produce this picture of early Maryland.
For us, the end of the week, the end of the dig, was the end of the story. But for the tent full of scientists, we left looking over the week's discoveries like kids on Christmas morning. It was clear the payoff of Project Lead Coffins was just beginning. I'm Dave Maris for Nightline, St. Mary's City, Maryland.
And joining us now live from historic St. Mary's City, the chief archaeologist at the burial site, Henry Miller. Henry, so much to ask and so little time in which to do it. What's going on behind you right now?
Well, right now we have a team of the forensic scientists. They're sampling the contents of coffin 3. They're taking DNA samples, trying to stabilize the remnants of fabric, and get out the rest of the bones that are still there. So we have a lot of activity going on late into the night, trying to get all the evidence that's surviving here out so we can learn from it.
Are you fighting, to a certain extent, the damaging effects of the atmosphere?
Well, it's not too bad. There is a lot of decay in there, but it's I think it's something we're working with and trying to sample everything we can.
Give us a sense, because to the lay person, you see the bones. It does not look, quite frankly, all that exciting. What is it you're going to be able to infer and discover and find and test over the course of the next few months? What are you looking for?
Well, we're going to try, of course, to look at the nature of these individuals, try to positively identify who they were, what they did in life here, trying to learn from them about disease, about their health status, as well as about the nature of the environment that was here 300 years ago.
What are you going to be able to tell from the DNA sampling?
Well, we're hoping that if there was a relationship between the child, the woman, and whoever this individual is, we'll be able to show that through DNA analysis. Possibly we can link it with, if they are Calverts, positively link them with the Calvert family.
How would you do that?
Well, through the DNA, looking back through the generations, and if there's a female line we can track, that would be the way to follow through over this time period to positively identify them.
Now, earlier in Dave Marish's report, of course, we were watching the NASA scientists as they were sampling some of the atmosphere from those coffins. All bad news, or are they still hopeful?
They're still very optimistic, and they're still analyzing the sample. It's very complicated. They have only about 2 liters of air, so they're really using it wisely, I believe, in a very cautious manner to make sure they get the max data out of it.
And how long before they find out whether indeed they have any pure samples from back in the late 1600s?
Good question, but I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks we'll be able to get some results.
One more quick question, Henry. I gather the entomologists are also having a field day out there, quite literally. In other words, you've discovered some insects from, is it possible that they could be 300 years old?
It's very likely they're 300 years old. There's a lot of insects inside the coffins we've found, and we have entomologists who are starting to take those samples and trying to look at that whole area in the past. So that's another bonus we didn't expect to have a couple of months ago.
So for you guys all, a good Friday the 13th?
It sure has been. It's been a great week, and we are learning lots.
Henry Miller, we've been with you for a couple of years. We'll visit with you again in a few months and see what you found. Thanks very much indeed for being with us tonight, and congratulations to all of you.
Thanks, Dad.
I'll be back in a moment.